in. So to let you know how this will go, I'll start with a quick introduction. Then we'll go around and the scholars will introduce themselves quickly as well, because I think for you, Ola, it's nice for you to know who the different people are that are on the call. And then I'll hand it over to Lean for you and her to have a chat. So as I said, I'll get started. And if you want to hit record as well, Salam, that might be helpful. So welcome everybody. As many of you know, my name is Grace Atkinson. I'm the Executive Director of Jusoor. It's really a pleasure to gather everybody here again. This is the second of our Women in Leadership series. And this time we have Lean Elzeybek and Ola Mohajer, our guest speaker, and a huge thank you in advance to you, Ola, for taking the hour to come and talk to us. As many of you know, the current situation has made finding jobs even harder than usual, but in general, it's always a tough step from your studies and your academic path into the workforce. And finding a job is one thing, but finding something that's very fulfilling in a different industry with women leaders who are ready to rebuild Syria is really going to be something else. So we've put together this program specifically for Jusoor scholars and alumni to help you along that path, to offer advice and support. So keeping that in mind that this is specifically for you, please do share your thoughts, interact, ask. If you would like to type questions on the chat, then Lean will see them and kind of pull them up, and we'll have the opportunity to ask them. And also feel free to share with us your ideas via email or through the localized platform. So today's topic is policies and international development. I'm going to hand it over now to, oh no, we were going to do introductions first. Sorry, let me ask everybody to introduce themselves and then I'll hand it over. So why don't we do it like this? Zena, you start because you were the first one on the call, and then you nominate the scholar to go next, and you can see who's on the call if you change to gallery view.
Okay, thank you, Grace. Hello, my name is Zaina, and I'm studying in Waterloo, Canada. I'm in my fourth year of pursuing psychology and neuroscience, BA in psychology and neuroscience, and I nominate Susie.
Hello everyone, my name is Suzanne Trabelsi, and I'm studying in the UK clinical nutrition, and it's a master program. And I nominate Rua.
You might need to unmute yourself, Rua, sorry.
Sorry, yeah. So hi everyone, my name is Rua Al-Kadi. I've graduated this winter from the Civil Engineering Department at Ryerson University, Canada, and I've moved recently to Georgia. So I'm hoping this meeting will be useful for me. I nominate Bushra.
Hi everyone, I'm Bushra Dabak. I'm finishing my master's degree at Northeastern University in Boston. My master's is in biotechnology and enterprises. Yeah, and I'm so happy to meet you all. It's a great opportunity to meet the scholars, and I'm so excited. Sorry, I forgot to nominate someone. All right, so I'll nominate Alik.
Hi guys, nice to meet you. I'm sorry for the late arrival. We were having technical difficulties. My name is Alik. I'm from Aleppo. I'm currently studying health sciences at Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada. And I nominate, who should I nominate? Zena.
I've already went, so I'll just nominate Maria.
Hi, my name is Mariana Al-Tabba. I studied MA in New York University, political science, 2 years ago. I graduated 2 years ago. So far, I've been doing some freelance work and struggling to enter the job market. So I hope I think I'll get really good information from the guest speaker today. So thanks in advance. I nominate Maria because I actually spoke instead of her. Sorry, Maria.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Maria. I just completed my master in international public policy. I finished in December, and I worked in research a few months. Then I'm now like looking for like job too. I'm struggling to find a job. Yeah. Also, I'm in Canada in Waterloo. I did my master in through Wilfrid Laurier University. So I'm not sure who didn't speak yet. So I'm not sure. Rula, maybe? Ru'a? I nominate Ru'a.
I did speak. Let me nominate someone else. Ghada, maybe?
Yeah, hi. My name is Ghada Al Hakim. I recently graduated from the University of Houston from the Bachelor's of Architecture, and I am currently looking for a job. Yeah, I don't know. I am like whoever is.
Maybe we can do Susie next.
I already spoke.
Oh.
I can nominate who's left? Mireille.
Good morning. My name is Mireille. I'm studying Masters of Human Nutrition at McGill University. And I really need this webinar. I'm trying to look into possible funding for me for the next year. So I think it will be very helpful for me to learn how to look for a job here.
So there's Fatima and Hayat still to go. So why don't we do Fatima, then Hayat?
Hello, my name is Fatima. I'm an architect, and currently I live in Madrid, Spain, where I finished my study, but I graduated since 2 years, and I'm looking to define my career path.
Perfect, thanks. And then just Hayat, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Hayat Mansour. I'm living in Lebanon. I'm still studying. I'm fourth year pharmacy student, and I'm so excited to hear the webinar today. Thank you.
Great, thanks everybody. It was wonderful to hear from you again, and thanks to those that we can see. It's always wonderful to see our faces. So I'm now going to hand it over to the wonderful Lean. Lean is one of the co-founders of Jusoor and one of our board members who's very supportive and especially leading the efforts in Canada. So thank you for moderating this session, Lean, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Grace. And it's really a pleasure and honor to be with you all today. As Grace mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of Jusoor. We co-founded Jusoor almost 10 years ago. Next year will be 10 years, which is quite unbelievable. And it was, you know, as you all know, it was really, or maybe you don't know, but it was really students like yourselves that inspired us and asked us to focus on education. And it's really inspiring to see all the paths you all are taking and what you have achieved so far. So I get my inspiration, I always say this, from you all, and you're all my role models. So I am based in Toronto. I grew up in Canada. I've been here for 32 years. I came when I was 4. And my career has taken mostly the policy route. I've worked for the government of Ontario, both on the political side as well as the bureaucratic public service side. And you know, Ola will get to her introduction, but worked in the same place as Ola. Unfortunately, not at the same time, and we didn't get to meet each other. But and you know, most of my life has really been focused on my volunteer work. And most recently with the Syrian crisis, have been part of 2 organizations, one being Lifeline Syria, that focus on helping privately sponsor and settle 1,000 Syrian refugees in Toronto, and as well as being part of several other boards focused on education, as well as civil engagement. So that's me. I'm not going to take up more time introducing myself, but it's really my pleasure to introduce Ola. Ola is, there's not enough time to say all the amazing things that she has accomplished, but I really urge each one of you to really take advantage of the time we have with her, as well as she's comfortable with it. You all reaching out to her with any follow-up questions you may have. I'm not going to steal her thunder in introducing her journey and career. I'll leave that to her, but it's really an honor to have you here with us, Ola, and thank you so much for taking time from your schedule for this.
Dean, thank you for inviting me here, and a gigantic thank you to everyone who is here today. I'm looking across the screen and seeing your faces, and it's really an honor and a privilege for me to talk to you today. I was able to spend some time watching your last talk just like this one, and I was really impressed with truly every single one of you. If I look down the road in 5 to 10 years from now, I can't imagine what you will be conquering and what you will be contributing to, and not only in terms of the knowledge that many of you are creating as researchers, but also the contributions that many of you are making in your particular industries. So I am so grateful to be here and talk with all of you, and also hopefully connect with all of you afterwards. So Lean, would it be helpful if I just gave a brief introduction and then answer any questions that you or the ladies might have?
Yeah, Ola, how about you just kind of walk us through your career and studies? That would be a good way to get insight into you for the scholars. And then we'll do a little fireside chat. So I'll ask a few questions and then we'll open it to the scholars to ask their questions.
Okay. So in terms of my career, it's jumped around quite a bit. I have a notepad beside me and I was writing down which parts of the career I wanted to talk about, because there are a little bit too many. But it just goes to show you that you can constantly stay curious and keep moving and stay challenged. So I'll just go over some of the key milestones, and we'll pause for any questions and welcome any questions in between as well. So I graduated from the University of Calgary in 2006 with a Bachelor's of Science in Biological Sciences, focusing in biochemistry, and a Bachelor of Arts in Religious Studies, focusing on the nature of religion and women in Islam. From there, well, actually during my studies, and this was a really critical time for me because it was an important learning experience at a young age, I was involved in student government in my university. The University of Calgary has a really strong student government. At the time that I was part of it, it was a $16 million organization. So you can imagine what that means for I think I was 20 or 21 at the time, to be at the helm of such a large organization. And that was such a pivotal experience for me because it taught me so much about not just governance and representation, but also about how an organization is run, because it had staff that were professionals in it. So it was a very interesting environment where you had these very young people working with a general manager who has 20 years of experience running organizations. And so that was a pivotal time for me. And in that time, I was elected by my student peers and finished my time with the University of Calgary Students' Union as the one of the executive leaders focusing on academic matters. After that, I wanted to continue staying in a space of service. And so you might have heard that I focused in biology and religion, but I was doing all of these things in policy and governance and representation, and I was very socially motivated and civically engaged. So I applied to the United Way. It's a charity, it's a very large charity in Canada for those who don't know it. It has shifted a lot over the years and continues to play a role in many cities, mostly in poverty alleviation and awareness raising. It also exists in the United States, and I'm not sure if it exists elsewhere. So I spent a brief amount of time at the United Way, and at the same time, I was working in my own city in a volunteer capacity, doing work that was concerning the United Nations in Canada. In that scope, I was aggressively applying to UN jobs. I continue to be very tenacious, but at the time I thought it would be quite a long shot to work for the United Nations, especially because I didn't have a master's, and it is essentially in most jobs the lowest requirement. So, but I was still trying, and I was very fortunate to be offered a position while I was working at United Way. So I didn't stay at United Way very long, and I didn't say no to it. They said, do you want to go to Zimbabwe and work for the UN Resident Coordinator's office there? And I said, absolutely, yes, I will go. I knew nothing about Southern Africa. I was definitely learning when it came to development practice, which I know some of you have in your backgrounds. And so this was this was another milestone that I'm happy to spend more time talking about, because it was also a very foundational learning experience for me. That I spent a little over a year there, and I worked primarily in strategy and coordination. So anytime, in most UN duty stations, there's an office that exists that coordinates all of the UN agencies' work, and then also is a key bridge to headquarters in New York or Geneva or wherever we're reporting to at the given day. So my job was in that line of effort. And it was an exceptional experience. I got to learn so much about how the UN functions from a bird's eye view level, and really understand the nuances that separate, for example, what's taking place in the political arena. Sorry, the sun is still rising in Calgary. I hope you can still see me. But really, yes, underscored the difference for me between what's taking place in the political arena of the UN, like the Security Council, and then the development and humanitarian arms, and then also what's connected to peacekeeping and peace building. So from there, it was a key decision time for me. I needed to decide if I was going to continue. I was still pursuing medical school, oddly enough. And while I was in Zimbabwe, I was invited to interview. So I left briefly my time, I took leave, and I went and interviewed. This decision, there's a lot of, this was a critical decision point. This was the time where I decided, you know what, my life has kicked off in this amazing way that my heart was moving in, but my brain wasn't catching up to, because I was still pursuing. I thought I wanted to do public health, and I thought that health was the foundation of any strong society. I think that is still certainly true, but I gained a different set of insights when I worked at that kind of 30,000 foot coordinating view, where I was able to see, well, economic development is critical. Governance, justice, rule of law, also critical. Health, yes. Women's empowerment. And so I was able to see what the different components are of setting up or attempting to set up what a very healthy society and strong livelihoods looks like. And so that decision point then led me to move away from pursuing public health and apply to master's programs in development. This decision was also made because after Zimbabwe, I was supposed to go to Rwanda to do the same type of work. But as I mentioned before, I didn't have a master's yet. And it's my understanding that I was only offered that initial job in the first place because of the 2 bachelor's degrees, but I still had to go get a master's, and my boss was kind enough to lightly warn me. He said, Ola, you're going to hit a ceiling at some point in your career, so you will need to step out and do your master's. And when I was in the negotiations of that job, it became very clear to me what he was telling me. So I had to gracefully bow out. I told them, thank you so much for the offer. I need to go enhance my learning, and I'm going to go and pursue a master's. So I quickly applied. It was just a few months of turnaround time. I applied to programs, wrote the GRE, and well, rather, I wrote the GRE and applied to programs aggressively, ones that were focused and leading in international development and humanitarian, really just policy thinking in the international sphere more broadly. And then the rest there is pretty simple. During my time, so then one of the programs, which I know one of you here is actually a graduate of, I went to Colombia SIPA, or the School of International and Public Affairs. And interestingly, I think I have the same degree as the woman who, I don't see her name here today, or maybe I'm forgetting. Anyway, so I graduated with economic and political development, focusing in conflict. And during that time, I worked for the International Labor Organization and International Finance Corporation on a project in Jordan that sought to understand Syrian refugee employment, or rather barriers to Syrian refugee employment in the Kingdom of Jordan as it pertained to an international peace agreement. And then from there, based on some advice from my colleagues still in the UN, many of them had advised that I spend some time working in government, that it would be helpful for me. And that's where actually mine and Lean's paths somewhat overlapped, but not in the neatest way. And I worked for the Ontario Public Service, finishing off in international trade. And then now I find myself at the US Institute of Peace, based in Washington, DC, where I manage programs in Sudan and South Sudan that focus primarily on mitigating conflict, enhancing justice, rule of law, and governance, enhancing inclusion in those conversations, and then peace building more broadly.
So not a very eventful journey, Ola, that you have taken at all. Thank you. That's so inspiring, and we'll touch on different parts of your journey as we ask questions and have our discussion. I wanted to, I guess, start the discussion by, where does your drive come from, and what was your experience like as a Calgarian in Columbia University? Because I think some of our scholars are in new environments, and it's a challenge at times. So I guess it's a two-part question. Where does your amazing drive come from, and how did you feel in Columbia University?
So to the first question, I think my initial answer is that I am adamant about equitable access to opportunity. And that is really what drives my motivation to continue working in a service-oriented and civically engaged capacity. Oftentimes we use civically engaged as a phrase that focuses on our own city, and that's how it's appropriately used. But I use it also in the scope internationally. It is painful is maybe a strong word, but it is painful and frustrating for me to witness inequity around the world. And whether that's in just the ability to find a job, or the ability to go to school, or the ability to influence if you have elected officials or your government, I think that those elements and many others are so critical to having some semblance of a livelihood that everyone deserves. And so this is what drives me to continue doing the work that I do, and why I've continued to stay in the spaces that I have. And to your second question, about what it's like to be in Colombia. So it was one of the best experiences I have had the great fortune to be a part of. To the other person who graduated from this program, even though it's one of the best, it will destroy you. It's so incredibly difficult, and challenging is an understatement. Sleeping was a privilege because of how intense that program is. Not only was the academic curriculum tremendously rigorous, the practical components were also outstanding. I spent so many hours sitting in the Security Council watching deliberations of the member states on various topics that I was allowed to. I spent many hours engaged in different organs of the UN. I was interested in the UN, so that's what I focused on. And then I also, one of the other key pieces about that program is the amount of people that are engaged with SIPA. And so whether it is the students, which are so tremendously impressive, or the people that Colombia is able to bring. So for example, I was able, before Kofi Annan passed away, I was able to talk to him and answer him questions, and it's only because of the clout that the professors and the students bring to the table. I was also able to attend a talk with Madeleine Albright. I was curious about her time in US policy, or as the, yes, in international US policy. And then other key speakers like, I think she's now currently the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, and hear from her and understand her journey. But then outside of these very famous names, the students there are outstanding, and the professors were absolutely amazing. And I'll share with you just one story that kind of highlights what kind of students you'll meet there. So you have to have some years of experience before you apply to Colombia. It's very rare that anyone will get in without something. I think it's like 3 or 4 years of experience working. We were sitting in a class on, I think it had to do with governance, and in governance in essentially World Bank programs that enhanced governance capacity in different governments around the world. And so we'd work through case studies of actual projects that had taken place. And we were working on a case study on Liberia, or discussing, I think, a case study on Liberia and the Ebola response. And we were talking about the case study and debating what strategies could have been better, what worked really well. And as we're having this debate, one of my peers' hands goes up, and she says, and she's still my friend till today, she raises her hand and she says, "Oh yeah, I was working for the Liberian government at that time. I'm very familiar with this. Let me tell you about our rationale of why we came to these conclusions." And in my mind, that that was first of all, it was the first time I had seen that because it was in my first semester, but that happens so often in the program because of the people from around the world. It's an international program that it was able to bring. So not only was I looking at case studies, I was sitting with these amazing people who had done this outstanding work, and were really trying to just learn more and better themselves as well. And so the program was amazing for me as a Calgarian, I remember, and coming from a smaller Canadian background, also a different set of backgrounds. I don't come from, you can imagine what the tuition is like at such an institution. I don't come from a background that can pay for that tuition. That was largely on scholarship, and I'm continuing to pay for it today, 5 years later. So that was also another interesting set of experiences. But either way, it was exceptional. And the friends that I still have and the acquaintances as well that I've made continue to have an impact on my life. And overall, it was amazing.
Thanks, Ola. You know, it's really interesting how you started with your bachelor's in one subject and, you know, graduated from that, and how your volunteer work seems to have taken you, you know, on the journey that you did, and on, you know, civil service and public service and all that. Through it all, through your career so far, how have you balanced life and work? And I know, you know, this is always a debate, especially women have, with all the responsibilities we have, you know, with our families, community, and home. How have you been able to balance it? And, you know, for lack of a better word, and what are, you know, some sacrifices that you've had to make, or you know, felt you had to do throughout your journey?
So my balancing act continues to develop. I will sometimes deep dive into my work, which might take me into anywhere between like 11 to 15 hours a day. But then, as we all know, that's not very healthy to do in the long run. So I will pull back when it makes sense. And I continue to pull back on that and manage my time in that way. But the balance for me now is, those days are fewer and fewer. And it's because I have a strong commitment towards family and my own mental health. And it sounds odd to say it in that way, the second part, but truly, I found if I'm not taking time to be with myself and my own thoughts, everything else around me isn't as strong as it could be. So I keep that in mind as I move forward in my career. My husband also helps with that a lot. He is so tremendously supportive, and I feel every day lucky to have found him and be with him. And he not only helps me keep a balance, but he's also tremendously supportive when the balance has to shift. And so I would also say that in my experience, and from the experience that I've learned in my mentors, having a strong partner is also critical to maintaining that balance.
That, for sure, I can attest to that as well. A strong partner is critical, and someone that sees the vision and ambition that you have, and you know, inspires you to reach it, but also supports you in that journey. You touched actually on you mentioned mentors. And I thought it would be an interesting question to ask you, you know, how do you connect and network with the right people? I mean, as recent, you know, university students and graduates, I think our scholars are always keen to make those connections, but sometimes it's intimidating and a bit overwhelming on how do you start that? Any advice on networking and connecting, as well as building a mentorship network?
So I'm happy to talk a little bit about how I approach this, because for me, so maybe I'll just speak about my own experience actually. But what I was going to say is, I know that for some, networking can feel a little robotic, and it feels that way to me. So I don't necessarily network in a traditional sense. What I do is the following. Generally, as I meet people as I go through either my career or outside of it, and every so often I encounter someone that I think, wow, I would love to learn from you. They don't necessarily have to even be in my career path. Actually, many of them in my life have not been. What I admire about them, the way they carry themselves and the way that they lead. And this is something that I love to learn from, particularly by watching. So sometimes they're in my workspace and I get to see them engage, and I learn a great deal about how to also engage. And so generally what I end up doing is just either keeping in touch naturally and continuing to ask for advice, but this is only with people that I have a genuine connection with. Yes, the connection really matters to me. And of course, like I said before, people I admire. And so either it will stay a natural connection, or actually very recently, there's a man that I work with, not directly, but he works in my organization. And in the same way, I admire the way he carries himself. I think what connects some of my mentors is that they're people of honor and commitment and respect, and they're holistic leaders. And so I saw some of those traits in him, and I just asked him in an email at one point, hi, we were talking about something else work related in an email, and I said, by the way, would you be willing to be my mentor? And he responded, wow, this would be such an honor and privilege. I think he was shocked by it because we were talking about something else work related, but he continues to help me navigate in my own organization where I am now. And it's been great to have him. So sometimes it's a natural connection that I continue to keep in touch with over the years. And sometimes I just very directly say, hi, can you advise me from time to time? I really admire the way you work.
Yeah, and it's as simple as that. I mean, I think as humans, we tend to overthink, or over-engineer our next step or asking someone. But yeah, can you mentor me? Can you give me some advice? I love that. Thanks, Ola. I'm gonna, with the remaining time we have, open it up to the scholars for any questions they may have. I'll start with Rua has a question, and then we'll go to Marae. So go ahead, Rua.
Yeah. So hi, Ola. It's an honor to meet you. I have a question because I've graduated from the civil engineering department from Ryerson University. So it's very far away from what you have been studying. However, I've always been interested in helping refugees around the world and helping those people in need. And I think civil services and public services is something that we can all contribute in. However, with my degree, what do you think I should do more to maybe be involved in that in job environment?
So with your degree, you bring a unique skill set in that you have a concrete technical skill, engineering, and there is definitely a number of NGOs as well as actually international organizations, mostly NGOs though, but some IOs that will value this skill set. So for example, I mean, I'll give one example, perhaps not in engineering, but in agricultural engineering. Well, it is in engineering, agricultural engineering. There are organizations that exist that focus on enhancing capacity around farming, which is also connected to food security and nutrition. And so some of the skill sets that are desired there, as you can imagine, are agricultural engineering and supporting locals in whichever places they reside. So it would have to be specific contexts to plant certain types of crops that will yield certain amounts of growth that can then get to market. So even in that, there are a few technical skills just in that very short description I gave. One would be agricultural expertise. Two is actually supply chain. And so there are skill sets that are really so tremendously valuable in international development space that can help communities that are marginalized. And it would be the same with refugees. The programs are numerous. I can talk about many other projects that I know of, but I'll share one with you actually around refugees, and it's taking place. One of my friends is working in Bil Iraq, and he's working with refugees there. Actually, it's more than one set of friends. There's a lot of projects right now in Iraq, but they will work with refugees along with other displaced communities to build their own technical skill sets. So it's technical training. So if you have technical skill set, it would make sense that then if you were to advance your current training to do training, I know that sounds odd, but training is also a technical, it's also an area of expertise, how to train. Then there wouldn't be necessarily anything that would stop you from offering training on particular areas, whatever your technical skill set is, to refugees. And so I hope that was helpful, but certainly there are these types of skill sets, whether they're in engineering, sciences, business, they're really helpful. And the last thing that I'll say is actually, there was a job before Zimbabwe that I was rejected from because I didn't have an MBA. And it was for the UN in Geneva, and they specifically wanted someone with an MBA. So I hope that's helpful in that these paths are not necessarily so linear. They're not like you study international development or humanitarian aid or something like that, and then you do it. Yes, that's one path, but there are certainly many other paths that bring value to this type of work all around the world.
Thank you for, sorry, Lynn. Thank you, Ola. I just have one more thing to say. When you graduated, you volunteered. So was volunteering volunteering was the way you shifted your career, I think. So do you suggest that we should volunteer in different things after we graduate, or do you think we should focus on job hunting?
Both. Definitely both. So I was working for United Way when I was volunteering for the United Nations Association in Canada. And I was also applying for jobs to the UN and other places. So being as involved as possible, which is quite exhausting, but I mean, you miss all the shots that you don't take, as they say.
Thank you, Ola. And yeah, thank you, Ola. It took a lot from your time.
That was a great question, Ra. Thanks so much for posing it. I'll ask Marie to ask her question, and then we'll end with a question from Susie. We have about 10 minutes, so just keep that in mind. And also know that you now have a connection to Ola, so feel free, with Ola's permission, I'm volunteering you to reach out to her after the session with more questions.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Really, it's very interesting. For me, I studied pharmacy as my undergrad, and for my master's, I'm doing nutrition. My passion has always been working with NGOs and international organizations. I like to think that my job will have an impact on people's lives. My volunteering experience took place in Syria, and I know in Canada it's very important to get a Canadian experience. So what would you say, other than a master's degree, would help me get into working with NGOs in the health sector?
So I think based on the experiences that you shared, I mean, you would be well positioned. You have some of the credentials based on what I heard. And so in your case, it would just be to meet the right people and then also get engaged in a volunteering capacity. Volunteering it's a great way to get your foot in the door, and helps augment some of the skills you already have with things that you may not necessarily have done yet. And so if you've been focused, for example, you mentioned pharmacy and nutrition, if you've been focused solely on that, and now you want to transition to using that skill set to apply to work with refugees, what I would encourage is, and we can talk more about this later, is what exactly? And then
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to stay in the health sector with nutrition, but with NGOs. It's just now I'm doing volunteering with refugees during my school years, but for like my career, I would like to stay in the nutrition sector or health sector with NGOs.
Yes. So it sounds like you have the skill set for it. You would just need to apply to NGOs, and then if you can, volunteer. And if it was to stay in food nutrition or food security, well, you would likely be in nutrition. Then there are also postings for those as well.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll end the session with a question from Susie, and then I'll just wrap it up with some remarks.
Hi, Ola. Thank you again for sharing your experience. My question is, was the shift in your education path scary for you? And what made you sure that you didn't want to continue studying and working in biology or public health? Because, you know, when you study something in undergrad, you always think that you're going to work in that degree that you had. But a lot of times I hear a lot of stories from people that they worked in something totally different from what they studied. So do you think, like, is it scary for someone to think outside of the box and like explore other options in life?
Thanks, Susie. For me, it wasn't scary. It was actually very exciting. But I know for some that leaving the realm of familiarity is scary. But I became very used to uncertainty in my life, including about where I would be living. Like 2 months before I went, not even 2 months, before I went to Zimbabwe, I don't think I knew I was going to be in Zimbabwe. So I think for me, I remember a period of my life where I had to come to terms with the fact that uncertainty is just part of my journey. And it was the same in Washington. I never imagined ever in my life that I would be living in Washington. So it definitely, I mean, it wasn't scary for me. It was very exciting. And the way that actually you phrased the question has caused me to think and also to learn. And I'm realizing that at the time, I actually didn't think that I was shifting career paths. It just was a natural, you know, and like a river flows in a direction, it's not forced. It was just a very natural thing that happened. So I was very excited for it. And I think if at the time, in this time of my life, I mean, you eventually figure things out when you're ready to do it. But sometimes I suspect that if there are people around you who have a few years of extra experience than you, or parents or someone else, and they see something in you and they tell you, or someone might have told me, hey, Arda, I noticed that you're doing so much of this other work both volunteering and even in the jobs you apply for, perhaps you might want to consider shifting your focus. Maybe then I would have shifted my focus in a very, in a more conscious way. But I think my journey just took me in that way anyway. So it never really felt like a shift for me. And on your other part of your question, essentially being sure that I didn't want to continue working in biology, public health, I would repeat that it was really that experience, that first international experience in the resident coordinator's office in Zimbabwe, where even though, and I remember asking my boss, I told him I want to focus more on the health pillars of this development plan, this country's development focus. He was like, that's fine, you can do that, but all of these are also important, so you need to also do these parts of your job. And of course, you don't say no to your boss. So I said, okay. But I'm so grateful that I did that, because it really, really shifted my perspective. And it's what allowed me to kind of continue my career in a constantly curious way, where I rarely come to, what's the phrase I'm looking for? To rigid conclusions. I constantly stay open to the idea that I can learn something new and have something that shifts the way I think, or a paradigm that I'm familiar with. So if anything, it's just been very exciting.
Thank you so much.
Ola, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. You know, I personally have learned so much more about you and the journey that you've taken. I think, you know, what I've taken away from it is your amazing drive that you've had, and your commitment to constantly learning and relearning things, but also that you've had so many forks in your career. You know, forks in the road, and obviously very meaningful contemplations you've had of, you know, okay, I have this degree, but that doesn't tie me to this path. You know, just even applying to United Nations with, you know, no experience, or some can see as you didn't have United Nations experience, but applying to it anyway. I think often we, you know, especially as new graduates, are thinking of our postgraduate life, we think, okay, this is the plan, and it's going to be set in stone, and this is how I'm going to achieve it. And I think you've really opened our eyes that no, nothing is set in stone, and you can pivot as you continue on your journey. And pivot you did, and it's really inspiring, and a real privilege to hear more about your career. And I know I say that on behalf of all our scholars. So again, I want to thank you so much for your time and for all the lessons you have put on us. And I'll conclude it with that. Thank you so much, Ola, and thank you to our scholars as well for taking time out of your Friday to open your minds a bit and be inspired by our speaker. And I urge you to reach out to her if you do have any questions. Ola is always a breath of fresh air and inspiration, and probably one of the friendliest people I've ever met. So thanks so much, Ola, and thank you to Grace and Salam for organizing this, and again to all the scholars for coming. Ola, I don't know if you have any last words you'd like to say, and then we'll conclude.
Thank you very much for having me. It was such a pleasure and really a privilege to be here. And I look forward to keeping in touch. I've put my email in the chat box. I welcome anyone to reach out to me at any time with any questions. I'm happy to connect again.
Thank you. Thanks so much.